I was going to start with just opening up a couple questions. The first question that I had was, as I was looking, I was trying to figure out what got you interested in surgery.
Well, when I was in medical school at Howard University, I finished medical school in 1958, a long time ago. So I was first interested in psychiatry, actually. And the theory of psychiatry really fascinated me in my freshman year of medical school. But I became discouraged. But in the meantime, I shifted my thinking because when I rotated to surgery, I liked the idea that you could make a diagnosis and operate and have a finding, like take out an appendix and the patient would be okay. And I like that idea. I like the idea of being able to see what I was doing, see the result of it. And that philosophy has kind of stayed with me across other areas of my life. I like to do things and see results, if that's possible. That's the kind of the answer to that. So I became a surgeon. And why did I go into cancer surgery is a question you might ask. And I think I'm not so sure. You can't really understand why you do things, but I do know that my father died of cancer, testicular cancer, when I was 13 years old. And it disturbed my life a great deal. And I was always didn't like cancer. From childhood, I didn't like it. And I wanted to do something about it. I trained in general surgery at Howard University under Burke Syphax, who was, you may know that name, and LaSalle LaFall, who was really inspiring to me at that time. I found that I wanted to see if I could carry my skill level further, like LaSalle had done, and Jack White before him, both at Howard University. And I got the opportunity to go to Memorial Sloan Kettering, where after general surgery, I did residency for 3 more years to learn cancer surgery, radical cancer surgery. And because of my particular background in Washington, D.C., I'd had a lifetime by then that reflected what was happening to people who were not treated fairly. Because I lived that. I lived that very, very much in Washington, D.C. And so the social environment in which I grew up in, which was really separation of races, including all the way through Dunbar High School, where the high schools were separated in Washington when I finished. But, it was an excellent school, Dunbar. And why? Somewhat why? Because it was segregated. And that school had started in 1870, just after the Civil War, as the first Black high school in America. The teachers at Dunbar were people, some of whom were PhD people from Princeton and Harvard. Now we're talking about, I went to high school between 47 and 50, finished in 50. The teachers were high-level teachers who had extraordinary education, including the father of Black history, by the way. I'm trying to think of his name. He taught there. So now you have two different sets of prejudice, having the students going to that high school because of prejudice and separation, and the best teachers that you could find at the same school because they should have had jobs anywhere else that they could, but they weren't allowed to have the best students and the best teachers in the same building at the same time. And it created an extraordinary high school. Still believed to be one of the best academic high schools in the history of America. From that school, high-level people like Senator Brooke from Massachusetts came out of that school. There are many famous scholars. Charles Drew came out of that school. Charles Drew came out of that school. And I can name many others. So I went into surgery because I wanted to see results. I went to Memorial. I wanted to get better technically than I had just with general surgery. Then the next thing, why did I go to Harlem? Well, I went to Harlem because of that particular background. I felt that if I have all this skill that I've built up over all these years, I want to apply it to help my people. And that was 1968 when I went from Memorial Sloan Kettering to the community of Harlem to work as a surgeon. Now I'm ready to cut cancer out of Harlem. I'm ready to do it. I'm skilled. I know how to cut cancer out. I want to cut it out of Harlem. I can't do that. I can't cut it out. And so now I'm frustrated. I said, I got all this skill. I can cut this thing out. But then I get to the reality, I can't cut it out. Why? Because the people were coming in too late with cancer for me to be able to cut it out. I can't cut it out. Now, so that I'm faced with this. And I'm very sincere because I don't know very much at this point about life, except my own life. And I'm trying to find my way. And I've had a certain kind of experience that brought me to this point. I'm the head of the breast clinic at Harlem. The people are coming in with tumors that you can see with your eyes, ulcerated, coming into my clinic for the first visit. And I said, well, how could this happen? So this was a turning point in my life, in my thinking, because now I see that what I'm doing is not the right pathway. I mean, it's surely good to be able to be a surgeon and to operate, but if you can't operate because something in the community is overwhelming, so you can't. Something had happened. There was a socioeconomic invasion that was deeper than the cancer invasion in the community. So I'm dealing with something that I've never really faced very much before. In my mind, I say, well, these people are all Black and they're all poor. I'm asking them in 1970, are they dying because they're Black? Or are they dying because they're poor? Or are they dying because of some combination of being Black and poor? And so that became the critical question. So I took time to call in maybe 20, 25 women who had come to my clinic too late. They were going to die, but they hadn't died yet for advanced disease, and talked to them and said, well, what really happened to you? Why did you come in so late with a tumor? I could see the tumor. And she said, well, the story was this. The person would say, well, doctor, this was not the first time I tried to come in. I came in to the Harlem Hospital emergency room 2 years ago, and I had a lump in my breast, and I waited for 6 hours. I finally got to see a doctor. He was polite to me, but he told me, you're in the wrong place. You have a lump in your breast, and that's not an emergency, and you're in the emergency room. And so you need to go to the first of all, you don't have insurance. You need to go to the Medicaid office, which is $100 south of Harlem Hospital at that time. Get your Medicaid card, come back, and then make an appointment to the proper clinic, not the emergency room. So in summary, to that woman, the process that was being recommended for her to solve her problems was more painful than the painless lump which she came in for. And so if that's the story, then the question is, well, what do you do about it? At Harlem Hospital itself, I set up a free clinic on Saturdays. By this time, I'm director of surgery by 1974. I set up a free clinic so the person who's coming in could just go right to my clinic without registering into the hospital. I set that up in 1979, and it began to work until the hospital administrator told me, you can't do that. You can't do that because it's illegal. You can't just set up a clinic at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning and tell people to come in. And that was correct. You can't do that. They worried about malpractice and all that. And look, that was right. I called the Health and Hospitals Corporation downtown and said, look, I'm trying to help these people. And they sent a vice president up to talk to me and said, they say, well, you're trying to do the right thing, Dr. Freeman, and we're going to help you. And so that vice president, a Black woman, who came to visit with me, said, look, we like what you're doing, but we got to help you to do it so it's right. So she created a hospital number specifically only for my clinic, Saturday morning clinic, free clinic. And so when the person comes in to your clinic, put this number on the chart and the hospital will know that the patient is in the hospital. So now I converted a free clinic to one that was within the hospital system and went on from there. That had to happen. So that was a big step forward. But still there were problems with getting the patient all the way through treatment. Now, something else happened to me simultaneously. I had studied breast cancer in Harlem by that time and published a paper on it, the death rate from breast cancer in Harlem. Now, the governor's wife, Governor Hugh Carey, his wife died of breast cancer in 1974. The governor set up a high-level committee to advise him about what he should do for breast cancer in New York State. I was called to testify before the committee because people knew that I had the experience in Harlem. And it resulted in the governor deciding to put the money into Harlem. And from that experience, we developed the breast examination of Harlem, which was put under Memorial Sloan Kettering. Because of that work, I got put on the board of directors of the American Cancer Society, national, as a director at large, because there was no way that a doctor from Harlem could get on the national board directly. Somebody recognized what I'm doing. 10 years later, I became the national president of the American Cancer Society. LaSalle Lafall was the president of the American Cancer Center in 1978. I came onto the board around that time. And LaSalle Lafall had started a committee called Cancer in Minorities after holding a meeting in Washington on cancer in Black Americans. So LaSalle did a big step forward for the Cancer Society. I became the chairman of that committee after LaSalle was chairman, and he was going on to higher level. And I raised the question in that meeting of the American Cancer Society as chairman of the committee on cancer and minorities. Are these people dying because they're Black or because they're poor? The same question that had come to me earlier. Are they? But in this case, now I'm on a committee reporting to a board. So the board unanimously said, we have to study that. And you have to be the chairman of the committee to study yourself. So in 1984, that committee was selected scholars from around the country, epidemiologists and other kinds of people. And we did a 2-year study starting in 1984. This study was published in 1986 called Cancer in the Socioeconomically Disadvantaged. And the report concluded, for the first time that I knew in the country, that the principal reason that Black people were dying from cancer was because they were poor. That was the question that I had wondered about. Now we have a 2-year scholarly study, and I had led the study. And so the Cancer Society reported, with me as chairman, Black people, the principal cause of death from cancer in Black Americans is poverty. Now I have a real direction to go, because that's it. That's the answer to my question. 3 years later, I became the president myself, 1988, 10 years after LaSalle, the first president. I'm the second Black president, Cancer Center. So the principal activity I carried out during my year as president was hearings in America on cancer in the poor. Hearings. So there were national hearings on cancer in the poor, which I led in 7 American cities, hearing the testimony of poor people of all races who had cancer. We're trying to get to say, what's the bottom line? Poverty, universal. What's the bottom line? That committee concluded, and I wrote the paper from that the principal reason that the experience of poor people with cancer is principal reason they meet barriers. Poor people meet barriers when they attempt to get into and through this very complex American healthcare system. They meet barriers. And from that idea, I thought of a concept. If people meet barriers in getting through the healthcare system with cancer and other chronic diseases, then maybe we should navigate them. Maybe we should navigate them. So the concept of patient navigation came out of that experience. Now, let's talk about what does navigate mean? So birds navigate. They go from north, 1,000 miles south. Butterflies navigate. Cars navigate. Airplanes navigate. So people trying to get from one point to an end point. So that's the concept. So you need to get from the point in the community to some point of resolution. So why not apply navigation to medicine? So let's navigate people across the healthcare continuum. Now, these were poor people. They were, in my case, they were Black people. So what is the journey? The journey has to do with reaching them in the community, educating them in the community, finding a way to navigate them from the community to get a test in the hospital or elsewhere, like a mammogram or colonoscopy. And don't stop there. They get the test. You make sure they get the test, even if they can't pay for it. Get them the test. That's part of the journey. That you have to eliminate any barrier they would have as a community person getting the test. Eliminate the barrier and navigate. If they have an abnormal finding from the test, they need to have a biopsy to prove what it is. That's a journey that hadn't been paid much attention to. You have a lump in the breast, but it's got to be a biopsy rapidly. So the journey goes from biopsy to pathological finding. Now you have cancer of the breast, and you're going that far. And now you have to navigate them into treatment, surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, and through that in a timely way. And so we came up with this journey, shifting from what I do as a surgeon on one patient, which I still continue to do, to the journey of the patient across the continuum that they had to go from the point of the community they live in, to testing, to treatment, to resolution, to support after care. And that became patient navigation. I got to testify before the Congress on patient navigation. I had studied it. What happened was the Patient Navigation Act was passed by the Congress in 1995 based on the Harlem experience. And the information that came out of it came to law, signed by George Bush, the son, and by this time, I was the chairman of the President's Cancer Panel. That helped a lot too. I've been in that position for 12 years. So I had communication contact with 3 different presidents during that time as chairman of the President's Cancer Panel. I'm getting promoted. So this is another stream of life that's into the river of my life and the river of my experience that I referred to. So now you got something coming out of Harlem where you've asked some questions and you've begun to try to answer them, and you get to an answer, and then you get promoted, so you have a platform to say what you believe to the whole country. Because now you're president of the Cancer Society, and they get behind you, and they help to drive this thing. You get a lot of credit. Give to the Cancer Society for allowing this to happen and allowing me to take this thing along that way. And so now from Harlem, we get a change in the laws of America where millions of dollars are put into patient navigation. So at this point, I think patient navigation has become one of the most critical activities to help disadvantaged cancer patients. The American College of Surgeons several years ago determined that to have approval as a cancer center in America, you must have a patient navigation program. The Obamacare has within it patient navigation. Obamacare came out in 2012 and had requirements of patient navigation. So that I had the opportunity to become a high-level trained surgeon, that I came from a particular background that caused me to be concerned about injustice, particularly racial injustice. And I applied it to my work. And I really was the principal driver of the point number one, that racial issues in cancer are driven mainly by poverty. That's a different question. So how did you get poor is a different question. And why are you poor? And surely the 400 years since 1619 had something to do with that. But that's a different question, But if you say, well, what's causing you to die? It's because you are poor. And that's a different question. Why are you poor? You do need to act on things related to prejudice and social injustice. But you have to act on what does poverty cause. It causes you to have less knowledge. It causes you to have less access to care. It causes you to be fearful of the environment and all those things. We need to shift it back to a human concern, to concern that an individual patient, irrespective of their ability to pay and their educational level, can, in a rapid way, get into and through the healthcare system, particularly when they have a lethal disease. And the other side of it is, if you don't pay for it in the beginning, you will pay for it in the end. There's no doubt about it. when people die from cancer, it costs them and society. So why not take a change and shift over to a system where you're directing your thoughts toward the movement of everybody in a timely way to an endpoint within the healthcare system.
Dr. Freeman, it warmed my heart to hear that you won the Psychiatry Award. I won the Psychiatry Award upon graduation from Howard Medical School. And
is that right?
Yes, and I also won the Jack White Award.
You did. Oh,
yes, and rounded with Mickey Syfax. So yes, that story was amazing.
Yeah.
So, we know that life is all about relationships, and it's chronicles about your relationships with LaSalle de la Fall. Dr. Rob Winn is in Richmond, so we've got to give a shout out to your relationship with Arthur Ashe. Can you talk to me about how your relationships with those two individuals have shaped you?
Well, LaSalle was just a little ahead of me in training after a few years. LaSalle, one of the most brilliant people that I've ever met. So when I went into surgery at that time, I did not know LaSalle in the very beginning. I was related to Burke Syfax, who was the head of surgery at that time. And Burke Syfax was a great teacher to me because he dealt directly with the patient. He would put his hand on the abdomen to examine the patient. He wouldn't just talk from the side. So he taught me that. Now, when LaSalle came along, I felt like he personified as a young man what Syfax was teaching more than anyone else. And so those two people had a very deep effect. In fact, I went into surgery because of Syfax. And after seeing LaSalle, he showed me the way that a young person like me might have a guide on how to go forward. So those were two heroes for me in directing my life along the line of surgery. And LaSalle and I have stayed in touch until he died. I think he was one of the most brilliant people that I have ever met, who stayed on point all the time. There's something about life that's important, that you have to stay on course. And he never went off course. He kept getting better and better. He got to be president of the American College of Surgeons. He was well loved by everyone. So he set a wonderful example for not only for me, but for many, many, many people after. So those are my heroes.
Now, I'm down here in Richmond at Massey. So, Walter Lawrence was the other guy who played tennis. Did you guys ever get a chance to play?
I never played him. I knew about him. Yeah, I knew about him. I knew Arthur Ashe, I actually played Arthur.
No.
Yes,
Really?
that is well chronicled.
Arthur was 16 years old, and I was 10 years old. I played him in a tournament. He whipped me pretty bad, but I felt so bad about it. The guy, a 16-year-old, it wasn't that bad. It was a contested match, but I felt bad that a 16-year-old would beat me. But then soon after that, he beat Chris Crawford at Forest Hills after that. So I didn't feel so bad. He became the world champion. So, but he was a fine young man, and I saw him develop with Rowan Johnson in Lynchburg. I met Arthur when he was 8 years old, and I saw him develop to be the world champion. I was selected when I was 15, before Arthur, to play tennis by Whirlwind Johnson, they were pushing me as the Black champion to get into, the USDA. But my mother made me withdraw because John told me to live with him and she wanted me to go to school. So that's what happened.
You know what? Thank you for sharing with us. And for me, you are one of the shining lights. It's interesting how humble you are for what you did, because your thing of navigation has actually lighted a new fire in many of us. Again, I'm cancer center director, but it's based on community first, second, third, and fourth. And I actually give credit to you and people like Dr. LaFall and Dr. Walter Lawrence. So I just want to say thank you for spending some moments with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Good to see you, Dr. Freeman.